Hi, folks. Thank you for sticking it out. I'm going to do a little bit of an untraditional thing. I'm going to answer that final question that got asked about models being on purpose, distorted. That's quite possible. That's why we wanted to have an AI Safety Institute out of NIST, which didn't materialize, but it speaks to the need to open up these black boxes a little bit more and not to just trust them and integrate them in your workflows readily, because you don't quite know what is it that they are inserting and how potentially they're drifting your conclusions, even if you think they are beneficial co-scientists. So I'm going to stop there. It's my task, an impossible task, to provide closing remarks of the entire day in 15 minutes. I've been taking real-time notes, but first I wanted to open up by thanking Trisha, Melissa, Mitch, Mariah, all the people who orchestrated this day. Thank you. And Lalitha and Skip for the care they put in designing it. Yeah. I served on the planning committee, so I've had the pleasure of watching this day take shape over quite a few months, but also the corresponding anxiety about how it would come together. So let me say what I will do in these 15 minutes. I want to offer three things: what I've heard as real convergence, the places where thoughtful people in this room disagreed productively and very politely, and why I think they disagreed, and perhaps a few questions and observations worth carrying into tomorrow. I have to say that I come at this as a computer scientist and AI researcher, dually trained in biophysics. Got you there. So I have spent 2 decades on both sides of this conversation, which means I have been equally frustrated on both sides of this conversation. I will occasionally reach for the vocabulary of my primary field. And let me start there, because this morning, Lalitha and Skip urged us to be precise to the best of our capabilities. When we say AI in this room, we often point at different things. Let me point out what those different things are, and it's not even going to be exhaustive. There are predictive versus generative models over biological sequences and molecules. The latter learn a distribution and have the ability to propose new members, which can be rubbish, as many of the panelists reminded us. There are language model assistants which reason over text and help a person think or co-ideate. There are agentic systems which plan, call tools, the harness thing, the word always gets me, and can carry out multi-step work with less human involvement in each step. Jasper showed you the length of the tasks that they can carry out on their own. And then there is closed-loop laboratory automation, where a model proposes, an instrument executes, and the result returns to inform the next proposal. These have different capability profiles. They depend on different data. They also fail differently, and they offer very different places for a human to intervene, if at all. A good deal of what may have sounded like disagreement today was not disagreement about the world we're facing. It was disagreement about which one of these AIs each of us have in mind. So when we say a capability is near or distant, it matters enormously which one we mean. Now, where I heard convergence, 4 things drew more agreement than even I anticipated. The first is that data and validation, or more broadly, functional characterization, as our keynoter mentioned this morning. Data, not algorithms. Ouch, to an AI researcher. Data, the binding constraint. Harshi put it most precisely in distinguishing translational from existential risk. Her privately conferred image of AI grading its own exam paper to me is the one I expect to borrow for years. Several of our panelists made the same argument from both synthetic biology and AI, that the limiting reagent is standardized, high quality, curated, contextualized experimental data, and that moving into automation may allow biology to finally give AI what it needs. Kirsten made this argument from a facility that produces such data at scale, and now must decide who or what may have it. We all agreed that we need to be more ambitious and share data rather than fragment and isolate. And Kirsten mentioned that we really need that negative data. Those failures are important. The second point of agreement is the distinction between generating a candidate and delivering an intervention. Manhua gave us the cleanest formulation. What we have found is a hit, and a hit is many years from a drug, if ever. Humility about what we have accomplished or may accomplish was a theme. The third is that capability is diffusing to smaller actors. And that consequence is not a simple function of scale. Jennifer offered to us that reasoning from the absence of past events is weaker than it used to be. And events well below national scale can carry very real political and psychological consequences. Brett warned us to hold that thought carefully, that we read history for pattern formation rather than for a path. And what changes is never only the technology, but everything arranged around it. He also reminded us of the power of recombination of the old, boring things. Kathleen insisted that whatever changes, tacit knowledge, organization, intent, remain part of the picture and are perhaps the part our instruments see least well. The fourth is that biology has real choke points and that we are not pressing them evenly. Kirsten walked us through what today's instruments actually reach. Steve pressed us to imagine the future 2 weeks from now, given how quickly AI systems are evolving in their capabilities, or how they may be self-recursively improving. Shankar gave us the most concrete fact of the day. Benchtop instruments now exist, which means the control point no longer sits with a small number of commercial providers. Now, the observation I want to leave you with, let me now try to put something together. I want to start with Jim's own work, our keynote speaker, because I think it makes the point better than anything I could construct on my own. Bear with me. In the 2020 antibiotic paper that he showed, a model trained on roughly 2,000 compounds was used to score more than 100 million. That's an extraordinary ratio. It's the part everyone remembers. But look at the 2025 generative work. Tens of millions of molecules designed. And on one of the two tracks, of 27 compounds selected and sent out to be made, 2 were successfully synthesized. 27 attempted, 2 made. That is the most honest picture available of where the difficulty actually lives. And it comes from one of the labs that has pushed the hardest on this. Which brings me to the following. The gap between a result that holds in silico, and I love in silico, and a result that holds in biology is the most single important quantity in this room. It is what stands between us and the antibiotics Jim described, the countermeasures CEPI exists to build, and the therapies SKIP is hoping to fund. Closing it is the whole enterprise. It is also at present the most reliable thing standing between a bad actor and the harm we came here to think about. Harshi said this directly. Our inability to translate reliably is part of why the more extreme scenarios remain hard. Angie made a version of the same argument from the bench, that the capability everyone assumes will be misused is considerably harder in practice than the current discourse suggests. And that there's a real gap between what those of us who build these models believe is possible and what experimental virology actually involves. She also mentioned that she does not need a bioinformatician anymore. So the bottleneck on benefit and the bottleneck on harm are to a substantial degree the same bottleneck. Shankar said something that I thought was the most useful sentence of the day. He does not see this as risk against benefit at all. It is one technical frontier. And the real question is how we move along it with layered defense. He calls it in his work differential acceleration. I would only add that if the acceleration is shared, the preparation has to be built in advance, which is part of why we have come together in this room. Now let me name some of the most productive disagreements. First, is this a continuous or step change, what we see? Crystal reminded us that some of us hear the last several years as steady and largely anticipated. Others see genuine discontinuity. I want to suggest that these are less opposed to each other than they sound. A capability curve can be smooth, while its consequences are not, because the capability matters when it becomes sufficient for some task, for some goal, as we were reminded over and over this morning, not when it improves by a fixed increment. Smooth curves can produce discontinuous consequences. Both intuitions can be right. Second, where the binding constraint lives. Our first panel located it in tacit knowledge, materials, organization, and intent, if my notes don't betray me. Our second located it in data and validation. Our third located in synthesis, access, and infrastructure. I don't think these compete. They're different stations on the same life cycle. The researchable question is which erodes first? And how would we know? In other words, if, then what? Third, where the control point should sit. It was somewhat implied that guardrails belong not inside biological design models, but where AI meets the real world, synthesis, production. There is real force to this. A released model cannot be recalled. It seems we have already accepted this. But synthesis is a physical step with few actors, though increasing, and existing regulatory hooks. I want to hand this one forward, because tomorrow it will show up in Bruce Whitman's breakout group. His group showed last year that open protein design tools could be used to redesign proteins of concern into variants that the screening software at the synthesis providers no longer flagged, and then worked with 4 companies to patch it up. So the useful framing is not model layer against synthesis layer. It is that the upstream tools are actively reshaping what the downstream control can see or not see. Whether the downstream choke point holds is then not a question about where enforcement is easiest. It is an empirical question about a moving target. And I'm going to cop out and put it in front of the work of groups 1 and 2 tomorrow. Fourth, hype runs in at least 2 directions. Several panelists said directly or indirectly that we need to name the incentives that reward overstating capability. Lalitha, Harshi, and Angie have each described how readily the misuse story absorbs all the available oxygen, even in a room like this. Both distortions are real. Brett's work provides the proportion. Most of what is imagined does not warrant our worry. I hope he's still here, and I'm not misquoting him. A small share genuinely does. And telling them apart, there lies the work. Fifth, openness of both data and models, which we did not resolve. Kirsten runs an open scientific facility while at the same time building access controls for requesters who may not be people anymore. Several of our panelists framed the task as recalibrating control and openness rather than closing anything down. Lalitha has been consistent that what we must build should not be designed solely around the interests of well-resourced countries. Steve warned us, again, against the Westification of our discourse. That tension is real. We all agreed that keeping science open is important, then closing things down is detrimental. Now, let me offer one more that I did not hear mentioned. It is tempting to locate the right control point or safeguard slightly downstream of your own work. That is not a criticism of myself or of anyone. It's a fact about how expertise works. But Shankar offered that the system of systems framework may be productive. And I offer potentially instructive for tomorrow's prioritization. Some questions for tomorrow. Which of the constraints that were described today are structural and which are simply current? On what time scale would it change? If benefit and risk share a bottleneck, what should be in place before it narrows? And more importantly, who owns what, which pieces? What evidence would change your mind in either direction? Saying that in advance is incredibly difficult, but that makes it ever more important. Finally, what clockwork do we have in mind? We used at least 3 today. Our keynote speaker looked to 2045. Most panels work to about a decade, and our final panel and session ranged from 2 weeks to 20 years. Some of what sounded like disagreement was people standing at different distances from the same object. Fixing the horizon may make prioritization considerably easier. And Ben reminded us that if we set that to be X years from now, we need to look at least twice that back. Let me close with an observation about the character of the conversation rather than the content. What struck me today was how much of this room was willing to describe the limits of its own tools. The people who build these systems told us what they cannot do yet. The virologists told us what the models do not understand about the bench. The people responsible for infrastructure told us where their infrastructure is thin. The historian told us where history stops being an informative prior. That is how we learned where the limits are. We asked the people, you told us. That works once, but it may not tell us where the limits will be next year. So what makes it repeatable? Potentially measurement. I would add one thing to what we said about data infrastructure. Very intently put evaluation infrastructure beside it. That goes to one of the scenarios, that goes to Jasper's work. We do not yet have agreed standards for what a capability benchmark measures, how it is elicited, or whether it predicts anything in the physical world. Jasper's work matters precisely because it made capability measurable at all, which is the precondition if you want to govern it. The timing of governance turns on this. Too early, and we constrain work that would have saved lives. Too late, and we're improvising. Measurement will not tell us when to act, but it will tell us what we are acting on. And one more thing. We agreed, like good scientists, we need more funding, and more attention, and more talking, in rooms like this, with a multitude of diverse perspectives and expertise. We will convene tomorrow when Lalita and Skip will synthesize where we have landed and turn us toward prioritization. I want to thank you for a substantive and generative day, and I guess it's my pleasure to say we are adjourned.